a gritty win in Miami, a howitzer in the Big A Patriots Texans Divisional Round preview, and Jayson Tatum says, "I'm ready."
The Celtics are sending Drew Holiday to Portland for Anfernee Simons and 2 second-round draft picks.
Breaking news out of the association surrounding the Boston Celtics.
The Celtics have traded Kristaps Porzingis to the Atlanta Hawks.
50 for Jaylen Brown. This is Pritchard side. The crowd can sense it. Over 3 Bulls. Great in and out dribble. Oh! He set off the smoke detector.
What's up, everyone, and welcome in to Your Celtic Source, episode 50. We are officially at the halfway point of the NBA season. 41 games have come, 41 games to go. And you and I both did not expect the Celtics to be sitting at 26-15, good for second place in the Eastern Conference. This team has just been incredible all season, led by Jaylen Brown, of course, and he showcased exactly why he's an MVP candidate last night, dropping 41 in his hometown. But you have guys like Anfernee Simons scoring 39 points off the bench. You have Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser scoring 30 points, 10 made threes against Atlanta. And then you just have the coaching masterclass that Joe Mazzulla has put on this season, getting everyone to buy in, benching starters sometimes, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, sitting when they don't have it, and allowing the younger guys to come back and win you games like we saw in Miami, like we saw earlier in the season against the Pacers when they were down 20 at halftime. Like, Joe Mazzulla is a number one candidate for Coach of the Year. And, I want to do a deep dive into these last 2 games, starting with the Miami game, and then we'll get to what happened in Atlanta and how the Celtics were able just to, shoot their way to a just dominant performance, record-setting night on Saturday. But to start with the Miami game, obviously this is the Anfernee Simons game. And to be quite honest, Anfernee Simons, we're going to get to a little, sort of debate on whether he or Peyton Pritchard should be starting. But to be honest, this game is a game where it just did not look good right from the start. Neemias Queta was getting destroyed off the dribble from Bam Adebayo. Norman Powell, Tyler Hero were hitting big threes. And they were down 27-9 with like 2 minutes left in the first quarter. It was looking like a just complete blowout and that things were going south quickly. And then Anfernee Simons comes in and he's just instant offense off the bench, right? He's always been known for his instant offense. But it's his defensive side of the ball that's also taken a huge step forward, right? He came into the season labeled as, one of, if not the worst defender in the NBA. And Joe Mazzulla, this team, this culture, has taken this guy and turned him into a playable defender, a guy that's not getting attacked each and every possession. And that just allows him to then go down and do what he does best on the offensive side of the ball. Right? And he carried the Celtics early in this game when Jaylen Brown didn't have it going, when Derek White, Peyton Pritchard couldn't find it. Anfernee Simons just was attacking the Heat players off the dribble, sidestep threes, getting them to jump and getting into the lane for easy floaters and layups. He just had it all working in this game, right? And he gets real minutes in this game because of that. Joe Mazzulla sticks with the hot hand. He plays 34 minutes. He closed the game, right, after the heater that he was on in the third quarter. And I think this, I'm going to talk a little bit more about his defense in just a second. But Joe Mazzulla has the trust now to stay with a guy like this. In past years or with other players maybe, if they had something going this well offensively, but they were so bad defensively, Joe Mazzulla could not, trust the guy to go out there and execute because he'd be worried about, the other team counteracting any offensive production with points of their own. But in this game, Anfernee Simons has a blindside block. He is getting rebounds in traffic. He's being solid at the point of attack, right? And there are some players like guys like Trae Young, other guys that, are just terrible at the point of attack defense. They get blown by each and every single possession. There are games where Anfernee Simons does get blown by, but for the most part, the problem with him wasn't the point of attack defense. It was sort of the mindset to stay engaged on the rear side or, a backdoor cut from another player, staying engaged with a sort of off-ball movement. And he would used to fall asleep, it felt like. In Portland, he would just get, teams would just backdoor cut him every single time down the floor. And Anfernee Simons, I want to give him credit for adjusting to this new role where he's coming off the bench. He's averaging only about 25 minutes a night versus the 30 plus that he was getting in Portland. And he's took it like a champ. And quite frankly, because they're winning. He wasn't on a winning team in Portland. He, was putting up 30 plus points a night. But for what reason, right? They were losing each and every single night. And now that he's on a winning team, he can accept his role being a little bit smaller, in exchange for the Celtics winning. And quite frankly, the way he's playing right now, the Celtics are going to be winning, and he's not going to be getting a smaller role. And, this brings in the question around him and Peyton Pritchard. Peyton Pritchard has struggled as of recently. His shot has not been going down, and quite frankly, he's been okay in the facilitating game. But when you're out there, the biggest difference between Anfernee Simons and Peyton Pritchard coming into the season was probably their defense, in the fact that you had a lot more trust in Peyton Pritchard to make the stops necessary for you to win games. But now that their defense, the gap at least has shrunk significantly with the way Anfernee Simons is playing defensively, I'm not sure that there is as much of a need to start Peyton Pritchard over Anfernee Simons. And I think Joe Mazzulla will continue to roll with Peyton Pritchard just because, he is a champion on this team. He, has the trust. Not that Anfernee Simons doesn't have the trust. But Anfernee Simons has been so good in that bench role, and very similar to Peyton Pritchard last season, where you never wanted to start him even if guys were out, just because of what he was doing off the bench, and you didn't want to disrupt that flow that he was in. And this is very similar to what Anfernee Simons is doing right now, where Joe Mazzulla doesn't want to disrupt the flow, right? Anfernee Simons Peyton Pritchard doesn't play in the Atlanta game, which we'll talk about in just a second, but Anfernee Simons still comes off the bench. And, he wasn't as productive in this game, and quite frankly, he didn't need to be with the way Jaylen Brown and Sam Hauser were playing. But once again, he jump-starts the Celtics offense after a sort of back-and-forth first quarter. And I'm going to get to that game in just a second. But Joe Mazzulla, the coaching decisions that he has made around players like Anfernee Simons, Luka Garza, these role players that are coming in and just impacting winning on each and every single night. He's emphasized more ball screening. He's emphasized creating separation, off-ball actions to sort of get shooters open, right? Stuff that you haven't had to do as much of in the past because you had great one-on-one creators in Jaylen Brown and Derek White and Peyton Pritchard and obviously Jayson Tatum. But now that you're missing some of these guys, right, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis as well, right, you're missing all these guys via either injury or no longer on the team. You need more action to get guys open because there isn't as much talent around a guy like Jaylen Brown to find an open Sam Hauser, to find Anfernee Simons, right? And I think Joe Mazzulla has showed that he's going to ride with whoever has the hot hand that night, right? He's comfortable benching guys like Jaylen Brown, Derek White, starters, and for the most part, Jaylen Brown, Derek White are okay with that because they know that, it's for the greater good of the team. I think, there are many teams that have a culture like that, but there are definitely some teams in the NBA where there's not a culture where you can just bench your 30, 40, $50 million a year player, right? How would LeBron James like getting benched on the Lakers, right? How would a guy like LaMelo Ball like getting benched for the Hornets? Now, the Hornets are actually playing well as of recently. That's a different story for another day. But my point is, right, the Celtics have a fantastic culture in the fact that guys are willing to sit down and, guys that are playing 30 minutes a night are willing to, basically sit entire quarters if it's not their night and someone else has it going. And we've seen this multiple times from Joe Mazzulla this season. The Pacers game, where they were down 20, but in the Miami game as well, where Jaylen Brown sits, he doesn't have it going. He had 5 turnovers early in the game. It just wasn't his night. And Anfernee Simons, basically saved the day for the Celtics in that game. Jaylen Brown does come back into the game and finishes strong. But, it was, largely his fault the way that the direction of the game was going until Anfernee Simons just basically inferno, as they call it. Yeah, I'm going to move on. I do quickly want to talk about Derek White. It wasn't a big scoring night from him. He made some plays defensively. He had a couple blocks, altered shots. Sam Hauser, Sam Hauser's game is coming up. It was the Atlanta game. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But in this game, it's been an up and down season for Sam Hauser for sure. But he showed a little bit more than just being a shooter in this game. He had a strong defensive effort. And I talked about this last night on the instant reaction after the Atlanta game, in the fact that, Sam Hauser's a better defender than people think, right? He's a guy that, teams want to attack when he's on the floor. But more often than not, Sam Hauser is able to hold his ground and make a stop or two. And that really just frustrates teams in the fact that you have 5 defenders out there that are above average. Moving on here to the Hawks game, because the Miami game was a gritty, grinded out, frustrating game until Anfernee Simons' performance. And, a win is a win, but that is not the typical performance that we like to see from the Celtics. The game against the Hawks was the complete opposite, where everything was working perfectly for the Celtics, right? They destroy them 132 to 106, and quite frankly, the game wasn't even that close. The garbage time minutes from Amari Williams and other guys, Baylor Shireman, Ron Harper Jr., kept the game closer than it probably should have been. But the story of the game was in that second quarter, where the Celtics dropped 52 points, a road record NBA history, most ever in a quarter. Just a ridiculous quarter. And as I said, it started with Anfernee Simons in that first quarter, where he hit 2 back-to-back threes, made the Hawks call timeout, and the Celtics never looked back from there. Jaylen Brown, after his rough performance in Miami, he comes back to his hometown after getting his jersey retired in his high school in Atlanta and delivers a 41-point masterclass, in just 30 minutes, by the way, right? There are only 2 other players to drop 40-plus points in under 30 minutes, and those 2 guys are Jayson Tatum and Larry Bird, so pretty good company, right? Sam Hauser, 30 points, 10 of 21 from 3. took no 2-point attempts, a NBA record for most threes taken without a single 2-point attempt. Previous record was 17, so he just absolutely shattered that. And we're going to get to Sam Hauser, but Jaylen Brown in this game, it was a methodical game. He was getting, scoring from all different types of shots. The mid-range was working. The three-pointers, the pull-up threes were working for him, obviously. His ability to get to the basket and get fouled after the last, couple of games where he's been upset about the officiating and the way teams have, guarded him. And quite frankly, he struggled over the last many games. Teams have doubled him, forced him to give the ball up, and it's coincided with a couple Celtics losses, a couple rough games, in between as well, especially in that Miami game. But in this game, he just showcases that, he's still, an MVP player, that he has the ability when he's playing a defense like this to just absolutely dominate them. And to be honest, this is a get-right game for him in a sense that, the last many weeks haven't been great for him. And, it's coincided with those losses, as I've said. And so the Celtics need to get back in a strong winning culture, especially because of the couple games that they have coming up, starting Monday against the Pistons for a number 1 and 2 seed showdown. And Jaylen Brown took advantage of that and used the mindset and the just poor defense on the other end to basically, take a poor, turnover game in Miami and turn it into 41 points. Sam Hauser, though, 8 of 9 from 3. It was one of those games, 8 of 9 to start the game, finishes the game 10 of 21. It was one of those games where, you're sort of shocked when he misses. And he missed a lot of shots late because he was going for the record at 10 three-pointers, or he was at 10 three-pointers, 11 to tie Marcus Smart's record. Funny enough, Marcus Smart, of all people to have that record, the guy that you least associate with good three-point shooting. But that being said, right, Sam Hauser, he had about 10 threes with about 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and the Celtics were already up, massive margin of or score point differential. They were up like 45 points, and Sam Hauser's still in the game trying to break the record. And his last, 8 or so threes was just him throwing the ball up without any energy. He was just exhausted, could not get the ball even to get to the rim sometimes. Air balls, trying to go through contact, just heave it up there, try and get a foul, see if one would go. And eventually, Joe Mazzulla just pulls him out. And it's once again a game where, he falls short of tying that record. His best game is still that game in Washington where he had 10 three-pointers, 33 points, his career high, before rolling his ankle. And, I think the Atlanta commentators were pretty frustrated and upset with the way Sam Hauser was going for the record when every other starter was out of the game. And yes, there's some concerns for injury, and, it's sort of an ugly way to sort of try and get a record like that. It'd be nicer to see him get that record within the flow of the game. But that being said, if you're the Atlanta Hawks and you're that bad defensively that you allowed someone to hit 10 threes on you, I don't think you have a right to be complaining about, them trying to go for a record, because quite frankly, you couldn't stop them even if you tried. But then you worried about maybe someone, I don't want to, think that anybody would do this, but the fact that maybe someone would, try and, foul him recklessly or sort of get him to, maybe not injure him, but, get Joe Mazzulla to consider taking him out of the game. And eventually, they call a timeout. Sam Hauser's just, basically can't breathe anymore. He's laughing on the bench, as best as he can. And Joe Mazzulla just says, call it a night, put it in the scrubs. By the way, moving on from Sam Hauser's night here, the Celtics can never seem to get a reunion with the players that they've either traded away or let go, right? Drew Holiday didn't play in Portland. Kristaps Porzingis, who continues to battle that weird sickness, unfortunately, doesn't play in this game, obviously. Luke Cornett, the only really exception. Robert Williams didn't play either, right? And, I think, it just shows the culture, the Celtics, mindset and prestige, in the fact that once guys get traded away, they never seem to perform as well as when they were on the Celtics. And yes, there are exceptions for sure. But that being said, to wrap up this Hawks game, and then I actually want to turn to Jayson Tatum before we do a preview of the Texans-Patriots game. But, I think Joe Mazzulla, after the game, he was like, we kept the Hawks out of transition with strong closeouts. Regardless of the win, he's still saying, we have to get better. That sort of mindset to continue to push on, to improve. Success is fragile, he said. Right, all these, sort of quotes that show, just how vulnerable this team really is, right? One guy goes down or they just don't have it on a night, and you could get a game like Miami or you get a game like the Pacers where you're losing, right? This team doesn't have the margin of error like they've had in previous seasons. Everybody has to be on their game to be a good team, right? And the Miami Heat and the Pacers are not good teams, and you still almost lost both those games. But that being said, right, the Celtics are 26-15, halfway through the season. They are second in the East. Next up is Detroit, and Jayson Tatum could be coming back sooner than we expected. We saw him on the bench after that Miami game saying, I'm ready, and quite honestly, I'm not sure the Celtics are going to do anything at the trade deadline. I wouldn't trade away Anfernee Simons the way he's playing, and I just wait for Jayson Tatum to come back because we could see him as soon as a month, to be honest. We could see him second week of February. Maybe All-Star break, I'm not sure. But the fact that this team is where they are and they have probably the biggest X factor in the NBA coming back just tells you that this team could make a run for first place in the conference, despite all the players they traded off. Everyone doubting this team. This team could have gone nowhere, and that's just a credit to Joe Mazzulla, Jaylen Brown, and the entire team for continuing to win without him. We'll see how long the medical staff keeps him out, and we see him. I know we saw him smiling on the bench. It looks like he's more energetic, more emotional each and every game as the season goes on, and sometimes that means that they're closer to coming back. Sometimes that doesn't, but often when a guy is more engaged in the play, he knows that his return is soon, and I think he's gonna love playing with a guy like Anfernee Simons because Simons can just take pressure right off of him and allow Jayson Tatum to get better looks, better shots as he's getting back into the flow of the game. And I can just see how great, pick and roll game, a game where, pick and pop really for Anfernee Simons, ISO from both of those guys. They play similar roles, but I do think Jayson Tatum is going to love playing with Anfernee Simons. All right, I want to wrap up the podcast by doing a quick preview of the divisional round matchup between the Patriots and the Texans this Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern. I think we all know the biggest storyline, which is how will Drake Maye and the offense, fare up against the best defense of the season in the Houston Texans, and one of the best defenses I've ever seen. The Texans are coming off of a 10-game winning streak. which included their just defensive domination in the wild card round against the Steelers, where they had, I think it was like 3 takeaways, 4 touchdowns, all of it in the fourth quarter. And the offense for the Texans, there are some concerns. Stroud did, look pretty rattled. He had 5 turnovers, 5 fumbles in that game. But I don't expect, it to be that bad again for the Texans. Likewise for Drake Maye and the Patriots, Drake Maye did have 2 turnovers, some costly fumbles that could have given them points. And I expect the Patriots to clean that up. But that being said, as we look into, how the Patriots can win this game, it really comes down to, how will Drake Maye bypass the Houston's defense, especially up front, in the defensive line of that Texans defense, right? And I am super worried about guys like Will Anderson Jr., about guys like Danielle Hunter, who had a combined 27 sacks on the season, especially because the Patriots offensive line is, they have 2 rookies on the line, and they do have some career backups in Owenu and Morgan Moses, who, performed well last weekend against the Chargers, but the Chargers are a totally different type of defense than the Houston Texans are, right? And Will Campbell didn't look great in that Chargers game anyway, and yes, I think most of their, better, pass rushers are on the right side of the line, so that should hopefully work out and help the Patriots, especially because they don't do a lot of, sort of disguised coverage and blitzes. I think they're last in blitzes in general, but they also don't do a lot of trickery on the defense side of the ball. What they show is normally what they run, and they just trust their defensive players to just go out there and execute. They, just believe in the talent, and for the most part, it's worked because, they've held teams to an average of 16 points a game, and when C.J. Stroud and the offense scores 20 points a game, I think they're undefeated this season, which just, showcases that, you only need to have an average game if you're C.J. Stroud and the offense of the Texans to go out there and beat pretty much any team in the NFL. That being said, the New England Patriots have a much better offense than the Pittsburgh Steelers do. And, I think the way we start with that is how do the Patriots go about attacking this defense? First of all, it's going to come down to, decision-making from Drake Maye. He held the ball way too long against the Chargers. Those 2 fumbles came from his inability to just get rid of the ball and take a sack or throw the ball away. And quite frankly, against this Texans defense and the questionable offense that the Texans have on the other side of the ball, I think you have to be okay with, punting the ball. You cannot be giving this team, second opportunities, chances to go out there and, get points where they would have otherwise not had a chance to score. So, when the Texans defense, makes a stop, make sure it's a stop by you kicking the ball away, not by you turning the ball over, because I don't trust the offense of the Texans to go down and score if they're down on their, 25-yard line. But if they're on the 50th yard line, they could easily go down and get points via field goal or touchdown, right? Those 2 fumbles were pretty absurd from Drake Maye, stuff that we really haven't seen from him all season. And the good thing is that Drake Maye has shown a great ability to fix issues that he had in the prior weeks and, basically eliminate them from his next game, right? And hopefully Drake Maye can do the same for this game where he had those 2 bad decisions against the Chargers defense, and he learns that against a defense that is twice as good as the Chargers defense, You cannot be making those mistakes. As I did say, the Texans are on a 10-game winning streak, including that domination last week. I think a weakness that the Patriots can attack is that run game, and specifically a run game from Drake Maye. Because I think, they don't give up a lot of, big or sort of short passing plays. Occasionally they can get beat long, which Drake Maye will take advantage of if there is that opportunity for sure. But for the most part, they don't do a great job against the run. I think they're last in, quarterback run stoppage in terms of yards given up. And quite frankly, I don't trust the offensive passing game from the Patriots against this defense. I think there is more sort of Drake Maye is more prone to throw a pick, maybe not, due to his own fault, but maybe, a little bit of a, not on the same page between him and his receivers, or just a great play from a defensive player on the Texans. I would rather see Drake Maye running the ball because I know he has the decision-making now that he's not going to get hit hard. He's going to make the right play to slide or get out of bounds and protect himself. And I think they'll just be able to pick up, much more consistent, offense that way if the pass game isn't going, right? If the pass game is going, keep rolling with that. But Drake Maye needs to know that he has the ability and, a quick trigger to run if necessary. I don't want him sitting in the pocket for, as long as possible because I don't trust the offensive line from the Patriots to hold up, for more than 6 seconds, to be honest. I think there's going to be, quick, short blitzes, or not even blitzes, but just a consistent pressure from the Texans defensive line that Will Campbell, Owenu, Moses, other guys on the line will not be able to hold up against. We talked about their pass rush, and just how good Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter are. Luckily, they are on that right side of the line. But I think really where this game might come down to is how good is the Texans offense. Because we saw, Drake Maye, or not Drake Maye, the Patriots defense, with a strong performance against the Chargers. And I actually think that the Chargers offense is better than the Texans offense, despite the Chargers missing all those offensive linemen and, Herbert just basically falling apart later in that game. But the Texans will be without Nico Harrison, or what's his name? Nico Collins. Nico Harrison. Nico Collins, which is a massive loss for them. Their number one receiver. CJ Stroud did look rattled, as I said, against the Steelers. I don't expect him to look nearly the same as he did in that game. But there might be one or two, bad decision, fumble, interception that he might throw, and the Patriots have to take advantage of it. I think, mostly they'll probably go with, Jaden Higgins, Christian Kirk, which is more of their slot receiver, inside guy, and then obviously Dalton Schultz, which was probably their main target with 82 catches this season. But, the Patriots are going to have an edge in the fact that their offensive coordinator, Nick Caley, is inexperienced. I think the Patriots will have do a better job of adjusting on the fly mid-game because I think, if the defense for the Texans is struggling, the Texans won't have a chance in this game because I just think that the Patriots defense will be able to adjust to what CJ Stroud and the offense is doing, but with how simple the Texans defense is in the fact that they don't do any, disguises or anything like that, it's just go out there and win your matchup. If they're not winning the matchup, the Patriots will just be able to just exploit anything in this game. Good news for the Patriots is Christian Gonzalez should be a go in this game. He was available in practice in the last 2 games, and he is available to play. We'll see how many snaps he takes early on in this game. Obviously, if it's close, I'm sure he'll be out there more as the game goes on. And, I'm going to pick up, or I'm going to predict this game to probably be a close game. I'd probably go with, Patriots 20, Texans 16. I think the Texans will maybe get a score off of a turnover. Not necessarily Drake Maye's fault, but, a touchdown or a field goal off of some sort of turnover that, will just be unavoidable, I think, if you're the Patriots. Because, the less you can give up, or the less turnovers, obviously, the better. But I think there will be one in the game just because of how good the Texans defense is. But I'm going to wrap up this podcast here. We will be back with another episode after the Celtics' 3rd game. I believe they play the Pistons on Monday, on MLK Day. I believe after that they maybe play, I think they come back home to face if I'm not mistaken, it's Pacers again, and then Brooklyn. So we'll be back. That is a Friday game, so we'll be back with another episode Saturday. In the meantime, we will have instant reactions after every Celtics game, so make sure to check those out. And until next time, go C's.